Welcome here to the FWA review, where I'm delighted to be joined by Tony Banks, London football correspondent for The Express. We're here just ahead of Chelsea's press conference ahead of the Champions League. You've not been getting much grief, have you?
No.
Teased immensely.
I will later.
We have got so much to cover this week. A mere World Cup draw to go over. That remarkable match against Arsenal and Manchester United. The small matter of Pep time. And then Clattenburg. Well, spanner in the works really has clattered some. We'll get to all of that today, and a fantastic award for Jeremy Wilson for all his work on dementia in football. Let's start though, and your headline here in The Express: Silver Magic saves City. He calls it Pep time. Your thoughts on what is happening with Manchester City and Pep Guardiola this week?
Well, it's 3 times now that they've done it in the last few minutes, and it's the sign of a team that is going to do. They're either going to get very close or they're going to win it. I mean, they're sometimes not playing very well, but they're getting a result, and they're getting a result late in the game, and that's what championship-winning teams do. I mean, they wear teams down. West Ham played very well defensively, but in the end, they were able to hold out. They've got so much quality in so many areas, and they just grind you down.
And then, what an absolute stunning match. Arsenal versus Manchester United. Red mist, the one thing coming out of it, and you saw Jose Mourinho's face. It had all been going so well, but a sore miss. But what an encounter. There's so much possession from Arsenal, they just couldn't make the most of it.
It was an amazing game. I mean, it's so open. You rarely see an open game between those two teams. It's very tight. You especially don't see that many open games with Mourinho involved, as you know. But it was end-to-end stuff. How Arsenal didn't score more goals is, I mean, David De Gea had the game of his life, although, you know, he's in great form this season. That was probably the best game I think he said he's ever played in his life. Some of the saves were astonishing. Having said that, it exposed a lot of Arsenal weaknesses, I think, which is why they're not higher in the league and challenging for the title. Defensively, they were poor. Sorry.
Everyone talking about De Gea's remarkable performance. I think the Premier League delighted that he's actually stayed at Manchester United. Jose Mourinho did give him the option to leave, let's not forget, but the Daily Mail actually working a lot and talking a lot and praising a lot the goalkeeper that actually ensured that he went to Manchester United.
Steele, yeah, well, you know, a former Brighton goalkeeper, highly experienced, great coach, obviously knows a goalkeeper when he sees one. Don't forget that when De Gea first came here, signed by Ferguson, he had a shaky start. You know, he wasn't regarded as very good on crosses, very good shot stopper. It took him a while, but now he's unquestionably the best goalkeeper out there, better than Courtois in my view.
Yeah, Courtois will be doing a lot though to prove that's not the case, won't he? Great competition between those two guys. What remarkable keepers we have here in the Premier League. Let's look to Chelsea as we talk about Courtois and Eden Hazard. Remarkable. So Antonio, how can England stop Hazard? Kick him. That from Justin Allen in The Sun. Interesting point. Eden Hazard was remarkable in that match. A bigger story perhaps for the rest of this week is the Battle of the Bridge though, and Clattenburg's remarkable revelations in a podcast for Men in Blazers in America that it was all part of his plan that he didn't send off Tottenham players.
Well, it's remarkable, isn't it? A referee admitting that he wasn't refereeing according to the rules of the game, but what the headlines after the game might be. I mean, call me old-fashioned, but I thought, you know, you referee. If a red card is a red card, then award a red card. Don't worry about what the headlines are going to be afterwards. A yellow card, the same. You cannot referee a game, or let's put it this way: you should not be refereeing a game on the basis of what the reaction to your decisions is going to be. Referee the game according to the rules. Full stop. End of story. That's what it should be. It's amazing, and I would like to hear what his fellow referees feel about that.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to hear what Mauricio Pochettino says about that. Because if you have one player sent off with a red card, maybe that calms down the situation. Maybe alters a game. And
could do. But I mean, there's lots of things that can affect a referee's decision. A lot of conditions, like for instance, just to take one, the weather conditions. If a pitch is slippery, you make allowances. If there's wind. If the situation is very hot in, say, a local derby, then you give people a talking to rather than handing out loads of bookings because you know it'll just escalate things. But that's different. What he did there was different. He went in, he admits, with a game plan. And that, I mean, there could have been broken legs in that game.
And it was getting to that point that you were concerned. And this is one of those stories that you hear it, and it's going to be big because you pick up the phone to your fellow journalists. We all keep tapping away and working away and keeping busy. I picked up, you were at that match, and suddenly it all makes a lot more sense.
Well, yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I don't think any of us thought that was happening, but you remember that night. It was just intense to the nth degree. Some of the tackles, if you look back now at the film of some of the tackles, my God.
It was quite remarkable. So that will be a big talking point this week. Pep Guardiola getting off no charges for going up to an opposing player and talking to him and encouraging him about the way he was playing in a match. Right decision?
Probably. It's a bit of an odd one, isn't it? I mean, but I would say that if certain other managers had done that, they might not have got off so lightly. Imagine if Mourinho had gone on and harangued someone. It looked like he was haranguing him as well. If Mourinho had done that, or say Nigel Pearson or someone, might have been a different reaction. But probably the right decision. I mean, it's a bit of an odd one. It's not as if he went on and manhandled him and really caused an open row. He's lucky in a way that whatever he said, Redmond reacted to it in a fairly passive way.
Right for journalists, though, he was asked about it straight off the pitch. Is it as big as the match, something like that? Should he be asked about it?
Oh, yeah, he's got to be asked about it. It's a very unusual thing to happen. I mean, you can't just pretend it didn't happen. You've got to be asked about it. I mean, see, manager approaches another team's player on the pitch at the end of the game. You've got to ask, why were you doing that? First of all, why were you neglecting talking to your own players? Why take time out to talk to an opposition player? If you don't ask that, that's a lack of journalistic nous.
OK, let's move on to a story that's also set to grab the headlines potentially tomorrow or Tuesday into Wednesday if the IOC rule that Russia should be banned from the Winter Olympics. Now, the IAAF have banned Russia outright, believing the WADA report that there was state-sponsored doping. The IOC have been cautious about that, saying they only want to actually punish athletes individually proven. Is that still the case now, though? They have now started to back the whistleblower that the IAAF and WADA have supported. If Russia are banned from the Winter Olympics, also banned by World Athletics, surely the questions have to be, or do they have to be raised, about them hosting a Football World Cup and doping within football? If there's state-sponsored doping in every other sport,
correct.
Could football escape?
How far down into Russian sport does this go, and how wide does it go? If it's in the Olympic sports and in huge sports like athletics and track and field, surely it's there somewhere in football. And I would be amazed if a culture which is as widespread as that doesn't leak into other sports. I'd be very surprised. Although there is such intense testing of footballers these days in UEFA and certainly in England in domestic games, I think it'd be hard pressed to get that through. But we're talking about a culture in Russian sport. We're not just talking about individual incidents, we're talking about a culture. I'd be amazed if it wasn't somewhere in Russian football.
And we're here at Chelsea ahead of the Champions League draw, and we have to talk about Dermot Drummy because that was shocking news that came to us all on Monday. John Cross writing some wonderful tributes and hearing from everyone in the game that he had an impact on, a great impact. His loss felt sorely here at Chelsea, and it was a dear friend of yours too.
Yeah, I knew Dermot pretty well, and it was a huge shock. And what was great was that so many of his former players paid tribute to him in the following days. So many of the Loftus-Cheeks and Lewis Bakers and Nathan Ake's, they all came out and said how wonderful and how important he was to them. And he was a great bloke. He was particularly good with young players. He was not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. He was a sort of a mentor to them as well. And I saw him as well last season when he was managing Crawley. And again, he had lots of young players there, and he was great for them there. And it's a terrible, terrible thing. I'm really sad about it because I knew him quite well.
The problem is that football is such an all-encompassing game, isn't it? And the pressure there is just some hope from this that people will go and seek help?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't, no one knows the circumstances about it, and you just don't know, do you? When hopefully it will signal to people to go and get help if they have a problem, and hopefully now football will realise that that this can be a problem with him. It's a very competitive industry, and it can also be a very lonely industry, and it's a hard, harsh industry. People getting rejected, kids and all ages, and hopefully something good will come out of it, but it's very, very sad.
And now a moment to praise the work of our Football Writer Association members. Jeremy Wilson, we flagged it on our first Football Writers Association review, but his campaign on dementia been given a wonderful award, Journalist of the Year, by the Dementia Society.
Well, my dad died of dementia, and I've done a couple of those memory walks that the society do, so this means a lot to me, and it's terrific. And he did a great series of pieces with the Astle family in particular, and it is an issue in football. I mean, it does seem that with the older footballs, on wet days, these are heavy objects. They've caused long-term, detected later in life damage, and people have suffered. People are suffering. Astle was a particular example, and dying from them. And it's a great bit of journalism.
And being followed on by a great documentary from Alan Shearer, proving that it might not even be the weight of the ball because of the speed of movement now, that it could equally be as dangerous.
It can, because the skull comes in contact with a relatively heavy object at high speed, so the brain shakes within the skull. And long-term, it's not initial damage, it's long-term damage that we're talking about. And also, the incidence and the detection of Alzheimer's these days is much better than it was. And as you get older, you become more susceptible to it. There is early onset Alzheimer's, relatively rare, but I think becoming more common. Most people get Alzheimer's in their 60s and 70s, like my father did, but it's becoming more common to get it earlier. And some of those are sport-related instances.
And when you're a football journalist with the weight of work we all have to do, for Jeremy to put the time into that,
brilliant.
Very impressive, and very
brilliant.
Congratulations, Jeremy, from all of us at the Football Writers Association. Let's look ahead to some uplifting news, and the Football Writers Association Tribune Night. So on January the 21st, we've been announcing over the last week, and we're rather happy about this. Someone you may have heard of, did quite well in Brazil over his career. Pelé is coming to join us for the evening.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, what a figure. When I was a kid, you watched Pelé on the telly, and he was just the player. He was just better. He was streets ahead of every other player on the planet, and that was in a brilliant Brazilian team of the 70s. I don't know how many of your readers, watchers remember it, but I remember it vividly. But he was just a brilliant player, all-round player as well. He just wasn't a forward who scored lots of goals. He was an all-round player and a giant figure in the game. So it's great. It'll be great. It's particularly those of us who are a bit older.
Oh, I think the world's over. I think many people are very jealous of you, having been watching at that time, live, watching the majesty that is Pelé. You speak to some of the greatest people in sport, and you mention Pelé, and their eyes light up like no other player. From the greatest managers to the greatest players in the world. It's a real honour for us. Coming up also to keep an eye on and keep across our website, the official FWA website, we're going to challenge you, football journalists and wannabe football journalists and aspiring football writers, to get behind a Premier League initiative for schools to write a piece of poetry. We're going to challenge to you, Tony, as well. All of us are going to be doing this in the next few weeks. So keep across the FWA official Twitter website and social media and see what you can pen for us. We'll look forward to that. Poetry. And while we're doing that, we'll also be back next week, poetry or not, for the next round of the FWA review. Some fantastic European action coming up. All of that to digest next week.